People often ask me, how do you come up with your ideas? And it's a question I honestly hate answering because the short answer is, I just do. But after some thinking, I came up with a recipe for my ideas, so let's get started. First off, you need rules. Now, I limited my creativity by avoiding anything supernatural, religious, or magical. And I also set some guidelines to follow, like avoiding characters dying and coming back to life, characters being overpowered with no weaknesses, and just to give all my characters a description. So first off, you need to know what species is your character. Now, if your character is not a regular human or a mutant or a meta or something else entirely, then what you need to ask yourself is these questions, so make sure that you screenshot this. Appearance. Now, my starter advice is to make a character based on yourself or someone you know, then exaggerate them a little, like making them older, giving them a different body type, haircut, etc. Basically, make your avatar on how you or your friend would look as a superhero or a villain. If they're not human, then please think about these things and be sure to screenshot this. Now, for designing your characters, my advice is to avoid iconic features like Spider-Man's eye lenses, Flash's lightning bolt ears, and helmets that look like Halo. Now, my reason for this is because you don't want to make an awesome character just for people to turn around and say, they look like blah, 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 blah. Now, this doesn't mean to say you can't get around this by adding some creative alternatives, but just try and avoid doing recolors is my advice. Instead, what you're going to do is you're going to get a base reference of the gender and the body type for your OC that you have in mind, and just start adding stuff. Now, are they armored? Do they have gloves, robot legs, goggles, a cape? Just take inspiration from concept art or other characters that if you're struggling. Now, look what I did, for example, for my character. I just thought of just some random stuff that I wanted the character to have for an example, and I just run with it. Now, origin story. Try to avoid the default, their parents died, and do something different. Now, parents play a huge role in your life for better or for worse. They could be scientists trying to protect your characters by giving them powers, they could be supervillains, or they could die later as a result of your character's archenemy. Now, there you have an absolute ton of potential for storylines by keeping your parents alive. Now, try to avoid making your characters a killer, psychopath, or just emotionally scarred from the very start, unless you're wanting a really dark storyline. Now, instead, I would suggest developing your characters over time. Now, this is where your friends, family, and allies become important. Take Harry Osborn or Gwen Stacy, for example. They are side characters that play a huge role in Spider-Man's story. Honestly, just think up of anything that can or might happen to them. Just Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong for you will. But remember, it doesn't have to be all bad. I find what helps is designing your OC first, and then just think about how they get their powers and why they do what they do. It helps if you have a bunch of events to happen in your universe. Like, for example, I have an alien ship crash, a serial killer attack a school, an underground fight club, cults, etc. Tying characters together or to events really builds development. So if you're really struggling to come up with an origin story, maybe you need to work on your world building a little more. Now, up next is allies and villains. Now, this is really easy in my opinion. Just make the villain have a good motive or think what they're doing is right. Every villain is the hero of their own story, as the saying goes. Now, some villains are straight up just fodder for a simple beatdown or to get killed off, and there's nothing wrong with that. So my advice is make 4 villains and 2 hero allies for your character. Now, you don't need to make every villain amazing or have a layered story, same for your heroes. Simply just make some knockoff characters if you're struggling, like a purple Hulk monster with 4 arms and laser vision. Just something a little different. Now, if you're bad at art, I'd really recommend using Lego to build some figures, a game character generator like DC Universe Online, Procreate on iOS, which is what I use, and Sketchbook on Android, I believe, which I hear good things about. There's also a website called Hero Forge, which I would highly recommend using, especially if you struggle with art. Now, these works of art don't have to be good, just as long as they resemble the idea you're going for. Honestly, heroes are a little boring, I find. It's their villains that really make them the character they are. So once you make a hero, just add some villains to them as soon as possible, and the story just writes itself most of the time, at least in my case. Now, I made a few characters just for the examples that I was giving, and again, they don't have to be good. It's just getting the ideas out of your head. That is the most important part. So what I did was I saw a Brussels sprout from my rabbit Lola, and I broke the name into 2. You have Brussels, an overweight hero with armored skin, and you have Sprout, which can expand in size. Now, I made an ally for them called ET who can teleport. Maybe they save her from being experimented on, and she helps them out from time to time. For villains, I took inspiration from Bugs. I love when villains pass on the mantle, so maybe after Wasp dies, his brother takes over, using a battle damaged suit, who knows. For Grasshopper, he upgrades himself and becomes Locust, since there's a species of Grasshopper that actually turns into Locust. Now, regen, simply she can regenerate, so she has this sort of horror look with a zipper bodysuit with scars on it. She could be an anti-hero for darker themed storylines to bring sort of a balance to these lighthearted heroes. RB could be like a monster ET was maybe transporting to an intergalactic prison until it broke free and caused him to crash on Earth. Oh, and of course you have the Ice Punt guy from earlier, which could be a henchman or maybe a gang leader. Now, remember, you are your own worst critic. Now, there's not a single character that I haven't critiqued or thought twice about showing. I almost didn't even start TikTok because I was so critical of myself. So just try not to overthink it and just start with a few characters. That's honestly how I started. And now I have over 300 and tons of storylines and I'm doing so much stuff. Now, for those of you that stuck around to the very end and, showed support, I wanted to give you this updated cheat sheet that I made. I used to use this back in the day and it really helped me make hundreds of characters. So I hope this does the same for you. And here's how you use it. So basically, just select one from each section that you've got, and you honestly have everything you need for just some default throw it together characters if you're struggling. There's lots of combos to try out, so this will really keep you busy and keep you going for a while. I really wish you the best of luck, and I hope this helps.